is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. Nothing is better than music. When it takes us out of time, it has done more for us than we have the right to hope for. Well, those aren't my words. Those words belong to the great musical giant, Nadia Boulanger. And what is out of time? Is it for us to linger in a magic moment when the art of creation is at its pinnacle? Or does the music allow us to see into eternity? Or is it simply that music allows time to stop and we have a moment to see ourselves in a completely different light? So it is when I read the biography of Belgian-born pianist Florian Noack that I am thinking that he is akin to Miss Boulanger. For his biography starts with these thoughts. Imagine a map of the world turned upside down. When such a world is your point of reference, the terms well-known and obscure do not necessarily apply. It sounds as if Florian has been thinking out of time as well. I like it. It sets him apart from all the other young pianists who are putting their music out into the competitive world of solo pianists. But of course, it is his singular talent that seems to stop time for us when he is making his music. Something tells me we are in for something special with this young man. And I have Florian Noack with me today. Welcome, Florian, to Center Stage. It is a delight to have you.
Thank you so much.
Would you agree with me what I was saying about, music can stop time? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a certain organization of the time in a certain way. So it can flow faster, it can stop, it can flow backwards. It can be many things in a way. But it's true that we enter somehow another dimension, and I think this is we enter another pace, and hopefully with each piece of music, we are in a different story, in a different place, and we don't have maybe a predefined way of playing everything, but every time it's a sort of distortion of the time, yes.
This is interesting because I get the feeling looking at your performances, I feel you're coming to music with and don't get me wrong here, but with the eyes of a child or with the freshness of someone very young and still curious. I get the impression you're kind of going into corridors like Alice in Wonderland and you're playing a bit. Am I close?
I don't know, because it's always difficult, of course, to define oneself. But it's true that in good moments on stage, when the stars are lined up, those are the moments when I let the piece happen. I let the piece play me, let's say, somehow. And of course, we always have our own bias and our own way to maybe distort the music. But what I like is just simply to go and see. I wouldn't say see what happens, but just in a way discover the piece again, like I'm hearing it for the first time.
For the first time. Yeah, I like that.
So there is a lot of game with ourselves and our perception while we play. Sometimes we have, of course, we know the piece. Of course, we practiced it for hours and hours, but we have to forget to rediscover it. Sometimes to be surprised. So I try always, if I'm in a good mood, I mean, not in a good mood, but if I'm in a good state for the concert, to come in a way with as virgin ears and mind as possible.
Right. I understand. That's beautiful. So, Florian, how did you come to music in the first place?
Actually, so my parents, my father is a professional musician, but my parents are both from a, let's say, musical background. Musical background is a big word, because my father grew up in a miller's family. He grew up in a water mill where they had also to work in the fields, etc. But my grandfather used to play horn as an amateur, and each of his three sons played another wind instrument. One played oboe, one clarinet, and my father's a flute. And my father is the only one who became professional, but in a way he he and my mom, who also played the flute, although my mother is a Greek and Latin teacher, they wanted for the three of us, we are three brothers and sisters, to start with an instrument early on without necessarily a professional aim,
Right.
but with a certain regularity and seriousness. Let's say.
Sure.
So there was some dedication somehow. And yeah, and the three of us actually reached quite a good level to the point that all the three we could have considered going further and trying to become professionals somehow. At the end, only I did, but my little brother considered it for a while. And for my sister, it was a little bit less her way, but she still had a very good level, I'd say.
Excellent. So what was that moment? What was that turning point when you knew that music was going to be your life?
I mean, there were two turning points. Let's say there was one when I started to be really motivated, because as a child, of course, I started because my parents offered me to, and sometimes I was also a bit reluctant. I said that once in a French interview that actually with my sister we had to do half an hour of piano every day, and we used to cheat a little bit with the clock which was above the piano. So sometimes we would a bit accelerate it. So I was relatively serious, but I was also not the type of child who would play 3 hours on piano. And then when I took part in a first small piano competition in Belgium, I went into the final round, which was a few months after the elementary. And I attended for the first time a summer course, a musical course to prepare for the final. And there suddenly I was in the musical world, let's say, I was 11, most of the people were 18 or 16, and they were playing much more advanced pieces, which I never heard. And of course, I suddenly wanted to play all of that. And that's the moment when I started to actually spend spontaneously way more time on the piano. I think my level made huge gaps all of a sudden. And so let's say this was around 11 or 12 that I got really into that. At that time, I entered also the Chapelle Reine Elisabeth, which is private school in Belgium, sort of related with the Elizabeth competition. So it's quite a prestigious thing here.
Mm.
And this was a sort of a professionalizing step, because all of a sudden, I mean, 1 year later, I was in a kind of prestigious institution organizing quite a lot of concerts regularly. And 2 years later, when I was 14, my teacher forced me in a way to consider the question and told me, if you really want to consider it, trying to develop as a future pianist, then you should really invest now a lot in it. And this was the moment, let's say, when I decided to quit school, which was kind of difficult at that time, and to really focus on the piano. I mean, I did this homeschooling, which we can do in Belgium. I don't know in the States.
Right.
And so let's say around 14, this was when I had made a real choice, which meant that at that moment we were trying to really target a professional, let's say, development. So that was a turning point.
Wow. So tell me this, when was the moment you knew you could make a living at playing?
Oh, well, I don't know if that moment ever came, actually. But
I love that. You're still waiting?
well, I'm never sure. Let's say we can never be. But of course, in reality, what happens is that since I'm 16 or 18, I was extremely lucky and privileged, and I couldn't complain. I mean, at the moment, there is an incredible amount of competitions everywhere in the world that young musicians can attend. There were still a lot of foundations or scholarships. So, all in all, I mean, let's say I never faced the financial question of going for an artistic walk rather than a more established one, because when I was a teenager, I was already earning, in a way, I was earning much more money by being a pianist than my friends at school, let's say, because of competitions and small things.
Right.
Of course, that doesn't make it a living, but that means that in your mind, being a pianist was at that moment also rewarding financially as a teenager. I mean, of course, those friends then became engineer or doctors or whatever. So maybe they got a more stable life afterwards. But in a way, it never felt like a risky choice because I was sort of lucky at the beginning, I think. I was a bit, I was a bit privileged somehow.
This is interesting. I know you have won many competitions. Can you walk us through some of the highlights of
Well,
the competitions that you have won? Because it's very
well,
impressive.
the highlights are not necessarily the winning ones. I mean, it depends actually. Um, no, I think there were. How can I put it? Of course, when I was a teenager, so like 14, 15, that was the time when I attended all the small national competition in Belgium,
Hmm.
like 6 or 7, and I was sort of lucky that I got a first prize in each of them. And that was, of course, let's say, rewarding in many ways. It was rewarding for the pride. It was giving a lot of confidence. It was each time earning a bit of money, which when you're a teenager is sort of incredible, I would say. Um, and well, then what was interesting, for example, is my first international competition that I did in Germany after all those success, and I was 15 or 16. And that competition, I didn't pass the first round. And that was, for example, a very big experience because I was used, let's say, to a relatively comfortable status in a small country like Belgium.
Right.
And actually, to go abroad, to go to an international competition where suddenly you see a lot of incredibly amazing, talented children or teenagers, etc. That was actually mind-opening. So I would consider this first also failure a very positive and a very necessary one. Um, and this is actually one of the reasons why uh, actually the next year I decided to study abroad and to leave Belgium to be a little bit in a bigger bigger setting. So
Environment. Yeah.
exactly. So for me, let's say every competition was a bit of an adventure, and there was always something to be gained or to be learned, and that could be regardless of uh, winning the first prize or not. So of course there were some, but for example, I would say another competition which was quite a decisive one at a small scale, of course, but more than some that I won. It was a competition where I was very much anticipated to go to get to the final, and I didn't pass from semi-final to final. And one journalist was there and was actually a little bit shocked at the result. I was maybe 16 or no, I was 18.
Hmm.
And he actually wrote about me and talked to several organizers who all started to invite me. And this actually, in France, suddenly I started to have quite some concerts, which came from a competition which, in a way, didn't work. I mean, I had gotten some special prize,
Exactly.
etc. So there are also some competition which were the occasions of meeting a teacher or getting a feedback, which was very enlightening. Um, well, if I mention, let's say, a success somehow, I mean, I think all of them were in a way successes. That was a little bit the point, but there was a Rachmaninoff competition where when I was young, where I got second prize and the public prize. Then there was a Schumann competition in Germany, which is a very nice one because it's in
Yes.
Zwickau, which is a city of Schumann. Um,
Hmm.
so when you're a Schumann lover, it's a very nice way to go. And there I met another Schumann lover who eventually became my wife. So yeah, I mean, there
And
were
here
a lot.
you are. And here you are. But it works
Exactly.
that way sometimes, Florian. Sometimes the audience favorite is the winner. It's not the first prize winner, it's the audience favorite. And obviously, as that journalist pointed out, you should have been the winner, so to speak. But you were. Look what it gave you. And
I think, yeah,
if
uh,
people remember you, that is a winner.
exactly. So I was, I think in general, I always liked competition because I had I think, a quite healthy relationship to it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I never expected from the competition that what comes is a statement, a true statement of equality or whatever. It's
Yeah.
just a bit of a game. And from this game, many things can be won. Many meetings or experience or concerts or a prize or whatever,
Right.
but there will be something good to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
It's
that was
interesting.
an
Interesting
interesting
perspective.
challenge.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's talk about your work a little bit because I know that you were recognized for a lot of your arrangements. And I gather you've had very interesting mentors through the years, and I'm always interested in mentorship because I believe it shapes us all as artists. So, who stands out in your mind as the teachers or mentors that have actually guided you into the focus you're at right now?
I mean, all in all, I had, let's say, a couple of teachers, and all were very important. So there was in Belgium a Japanese teacher with whom I I think I learned and we developed all the foundation of techniques, which were very important at that age. I also worked with in a music school, but with an incredible also Belgian and German teacher who was very important for me because it's actually him who encouraged me to study abroad, and
Mhm.
he brought me to many concerts where I got to know Vasily
Mm.
Lobanov. And actually, let's say that teacher, Michel Wilgers, he then for 1 year he drove me to Cologne every week to bring me to lesson with Lobanov, translated everything so that I could
Wow.
understand. So this is, let's say, quite incredible as a teacher. It's the support you can get, and
Yes. Yes, it's
so,
marvelous.
so for example, so I had, let's say, yeah, one teacher who actually accompanied me every week to Germany to translate a lesson from another
Mhm.
teacher. So that was quite incredible. But then let's say if I speak a little bit from a more adult age, I would say there were two main teachers. I mean, the two main with whom I studied. So one was Vasily Lobanov, so a Russian pianist and a composer also, who, who studied with Lev Naumov and the house. He also played for 3 years piano duo with Sviatoslav Richter. So in a way, somebody who belongs to, let's say, yeah, a certain world, a certain. He played with all the famous Russian string players, etc. So that
Mhm.
was. So I started to study with him when I was 16, and I studied with him until I was 23, I think. And that was very. That was for me a quite incredible time because he had an extremely intuitive and I would say global approach of music. Um, so I feel that in a way it was less maybe about learning something, learning a valuable piece of information. It was really a mentor. So it was more about
Yeah.
development, just growing as a pianist and growing as a person.
Yes, yes.
There were very few concrete remarks, but there was a lot of inspiration through his words and also through his being. Simply
Mhm.
being next to somebody, seeing him play or seeing the approach, a little bit getting to know the inner world, which is around music. I mean, he also introduced me to a lot of literature. We watched some movies together. I mean, it was really a time of, in a way, I couldn't really tell one information that he told me, but I feel that he was very decisive in making me who I am.
Yes, yes. So
Um,
the big picture. At a
in a way,
time
yes.
in your life when you were still really moldable like clay, and
Absolutely.
you were soaking this all up like a sponge. That truly is remarkable, Florian. That's very, very interesting. And he gave you your love of Russian masters, did he?
At least it came at the same time, let's say, and I think so. I mean, in a way, I feel that he also broadened my love to Russian culture because of the literature. I mean, he advised me to read Bulgakov, which I could never thank him enough because getting to know Bulgakov was, yeah, a life-changing experience, for example. So, but I think it was the years when I was already from myself getting close to Russian music somehow. So there was a lot of input which still came from me also.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, Lyapunov, Metner, and those composers. I
Yes.
think it was more me who brought it up than it came from him.
Understood. Okay. Okay. So as he broadened your horizons, you started to make your own choices. That's very interesting.
Absolutely.
I like it. I like it.
That was
Wow.
that was in a way quite magical somehow because because everything was intuitive.
Mm.
Nothing was really clearly analyzed or verbalized.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
And in a way, that's funny because it was the opposite of what my second teacher was. Um, so after that, I studied still in Cologne and in Basel, also in Switzerland, with a younger professor who is half Spanish and half German, Claudio
Mhm.
Martinez Menher. I got to know him because he was the at the time he was the assistant of Bashkirov in Madrid, and I
Mhm.
was hearing a lot of incredible things about the assistant whom I didn't know. And then I took some lessons, and I was absolutely fascinated. And in a way, it was very complementary, or I mean, it came afterwards, but because his approach is extremely different. He's
Mm.
he's an extremely brilliant, intelligent, quick quick person, and it's somebody, let's say, who can explain and verbalize things very well.
Okay.
And I think it was good for me after all those years with Lobanov, where at some point I felt quite comfortable with myself and my playing, my intuitive playing, let's say. I think it was very good to meet somebody who challenged me in a very, very different way.
Wow.
And I think it changed really my ears and my way of listening to music. It brought me much closer to musics that I was not absolutely not close to before. Like Baroque music, for example, it was an absolutely foreign world before I worked with him. Um, yeah,
Fascinating.
so it's
So altogether, it's like a melting pot, and you
well,
with your curiosity, your natural curiosity. You know, they have a saying, when the student is ready, the right teacher comes, and
exactly.
and it sounds like everything has just slid into place for you because you allowed it, which is also very exciting.
Oh, well, let's say I think with some great teachers, in a way, you cannot not really allow it somehow because I don't know how to say it, but I mean, in the last years or a few years ago, I had some lessons with the mentor of Claudio Martins Menher, who is Hungarian, Ferenc Rados, and his wife, who unfortunately passed away, Rita Wagner. And so, in a way, that was also, I mean, it also completely changed my ears. But firstly, it was very interesting to, it's always interesting to study with a teacher of your teacher because you see
Mhm.
some of the source material, you see how it has been
Yes.
biased, let's say, or
Yes.
changed. Um, and what is funny is that for me, it's those lessons, I never felt that I could, that I had much to do in a way. It's just that you are confronted with another way of another way of relating with music.
Hmm.
And through this confrontation, your ears change somehow because suddenly you realize that some things are different than you thought, and it doesn't really feel arbitrary or subjective. It just felt like almost everything I heard from those teachers, I felt, oh, actually, yes, it's obvious. So in a way, there was never really. It was always a surprise, but it never felt arbitrary somehow. So I could never really discuss it or say that where from does it come or disagree or be antagonistic to that.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I understand. Very interesting. You know, it really is this long corridor of mentorship when our relationship with our teachers and
Mm,
our various teachers. There's always something to be gained from everyone. It's
absolutely.
really interesting what you're saying, though. Very, very interesting.
Thank
I love
you.
the way I love your openness about it, and that in itself is a victory. I want to ask you a specific question. I want you to talk to me about the relationship you developed with a piano book entitled Piano Music by Guy Sacre.
Oh, that's also quite an incredible thing because yeah. So I think when I was 12, maybe, or at the time when I took part in this first summer course and started to get to know a little bit the repertoire,
Mhm.
which was the main motivation for me to actually practice more. I received a huge book. I don't have it here. I mean, it's upstairs,
Mhm.
but two big volumes. I don't know. I think it's maybe 3 or 4 thousand pages, which is an encyclopedia of the piano repertoire, and it's incredibly well written. I mean, it's really pure poetry in French. It's absolutely not a dry book somehow. And I started to read that, and so that was around 2002, 2003. which I think coincided a little bit with some internet development like Naxos library, where you could also check, let's say, some things. And that's a little bit where from, in a way, comes that sentence about the map of the world upside down, because almost everything of the piano repertoire I discovered with that book, which meant that I discovered without, I didn't go first to Beethoven. I just opened randomly, and if it was a guy called Dornani, or by the way, an American composer, McDowell, whom I discovered as a 13 years old and started to play it. I mean, I got into everything that was there, and there was no predefined pyramidal structure of, starting with
Right.
5 top composers, then the 15 next, and etc. And so this book actually really became a companion, and still is, for discovering, for everything I discover, because the book is also so beautifully, personally, and subjectively written that each time I discovered a piece, I wanted to check what does he think about that. And let's say what was a very nice part of it is that 10 years ago, I once got a call from somebody, and it was Gisak, who had heard of me in an interview, how I referred to his book the whole time.
Oh, I love
He,
it.
pro- he proposed me to do some concerts and lectures together, and he became a very, very dear friend.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
That
How wonderful.
was a beautiful story.
So you were like just dropping the book open and entering this world,
Exactly.
of what composer you turn to. I
Exactly.
love that. Oh my
So,
gosh.
but
And
the funny part, of course, is that I got to know. I mean, I got to know Clementi much before I got to know Beethoven. I got to know Alcon before I got to know Liszt. I knew much better Metzner than Rachmaninoff. I mean, it just, so it just came a bit in its own order somehow.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Florian. That's so fresh. So tell me, how do you approach a new piece? Do you have a relationship with a piece of music first, or do you just jump in like this and play through it and maybe come back to it a few times? What is your process of incorporating a new piece of repertoire?
That's a good question. I don't think there is a real, very thoughtful process. I'm just
You
taking
just
the
play.
score and starting. Exactly. But maybe there are some patterns, and probably some good and some bad ones. But what, for example, I mean, now it changes a little bit, but for example, I used to never listen a piece once I start to play it by other people. And this I did for many years, and now I start to change that a little bit, because I still realize how much simply one can learn by listening others. Of course, that brings a question of what do you do with this knowledge? Do you
Yeah.
imitate? Do you go against? So, in general, I thought, I remember this was an advice by Lomanov actually, which I think was very good. That he advised always to rather to pay attention not to really good pianists, but more to really good conductors, for example, because by essence, since it's another instrument, you are not facing the question of imitating or whatever. I mean, the question doesn't happen. You simply get a certain general intuition of a language or piece of music, etc. And this will intuitively translate maybe in how you approach piano work by the same composer. Um, so I think I generally stayed away by recording stuff for other people, but still now I realize that sometimes you listen and then you realize so many things that I even hadn't thought of, and that's still enlightening. So I try to force myself still to hear a little bit what other people are doing in the same piece of music.
Right, right.
But other than that, there is no
You just
there is
jump
no
in.
real. I'm just jumping in. Yeah,
I love
there is no real. I cannot say that I'm taking the score, going to the forest, and looking at it. I mean that would not be true simply.
I love that. That's so rawly honest. I love it. So let's talk about programming, because I understand you're really into that process yourself. Is there an arc in storytelling when you program a recital? I mean, do you have a recipe, your own personal recipe, or are you an architect of of
I mean,
a
it's
program.
al it's always terribly difficult to put a program together because there are so many possibilities and so many options. And I think it forces us to be a little bit an architect to
Hmm.
imagine how things can be built up together. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, it's always, of course, the question between, let's say, a thematic consistency and at the same time, yeah, we also need some contrast somehow in a concert. So
Hmm.
I find myself very often trapped, let's say, between wanting to make a lot of things which relate to each other and at the same time wanting to offer diversity, which is not always such an easy task. Um, but yes, so it's every time a little bit like I think it was a Spanish pianist, Jesus de Solon, who was telling that he always considers making up programs like a movie director in a way. How do you make the whole thing? So
Yeah.
here, for example, for the upcoming concert in the States, of course, I try to combine many things at the same time. It's let's say my first, let's say, important concert as a soloist in the States. So
Okay.
of course, it has to be a little bit of presentation of oneself. I try to offer a certain diversity in the program, and at the same time to keep some things which connects everything.
Exactly. A tie that binds, so to speak, a
Exactly,
theme that knits
exactly.
everything together. Interesting. So, but would you say that there's a certain amount of dissonance that has to come into a program? I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. Even with a movie, in the arc of the storytelling, every once in a while there's a huge bump in the road, and
Mm,
it may be something unexpected.
absolutely, and it's funny because I remember actually that speaking with Yusu, the pianist,
Hmm.
um, because I think we were talking of Janacek, that, for example, I absolutely love as a composer, and I could never really figure out how to include him in a program.
Yeah.
And it's funny because what Yusu had told, I remember it was a few years ago, but it was just a random conversation. It was, yeah, maybe you just put a Haydn sonata before, a very happy sonata. And I felt it makes sense. I mean, it has no maybe thematic connection, but maybe that's the only thing you can put next to this music. I don't know, let's say. So there are many ways to relate pieces together. I mean, of course, it's always tempting to relate them in a historical way or in a way of language somehow. For example, of course, Brahms
Yes.
and Schumann or Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn, but one can also, yeah, the thing can also relate in such a way. And yeah, I mean,
Understood.
here, for example, I think in the pieces that I bring together, I think one obvious theme, whether it's in the transcriptions or in the etudes by Lis and Lyapunov, is that there is a little bit the idea of transcendence, for example, that one tries to use the piano to reach or to suggest something else. And I think this can be a connecting element between, for example, the Bach Brandenburg concerto transcription I will play
Mm,
and the Transcendental Etudes by Liszt. Of course, the language is something completely else, but something behind is perhaps going together. So
I love it. I adore your transcription of the Bach
that's very kind.
Brandenburg. It has such inner life. There's a new energy in that, and then in this your strength as a pianist as well. I adore it.
That's very kind.
Wow, this is really interesting. So, I hear that you are actually also interested in jazz. Is there an inner dialogue about jazz that you gravitate towards?
I have to say that I'm interested in the jazz language that I love, especially the early jazz, the 30s, the
Oh,
40s. I'm absolutely in love with Fats Waller, for example.
oh my
Uh,
gosh.
I absolutely adore him, thanks to an American pianist. But of course, I absolutely cannot improvise. That's really a pity. But I also made arrangements and transcriptions based on such material, always with the same idea of trying to see how this instrument can be used to suggest either baroque ensemble or jazz band or symphonic orchestra or whatever. And and I think I take also advantage of the fact that I write everything slowly and painfully, but
Huh.
try also to see how how I could on piano recreate the polyrhythmy and all the complexity of a jazz band, which
Ah,
which needs, I think, when we improvise, I mean, or maybe when I would improvise, but checking, let's say, even some incredibly virtuoso and talented jazz pianist, I wouldn't say I'm a specialist, but I always felt that in comparison to a jazz band, when you have all these musicians playing a little bit at the same time and improvising a bit together sometimes, and
yeah.
I felt it was always much more rich and complex than what a pianist alone can come up with while improvising.
Okay.
So I mean, of course, I cannot improvise, so anyway, the question is not there. But I tried by writing down, for example, to see if I can put together all this strange thing and sound effect and instrument not playing exactly together from a jazz band, and see if I can, yeah, try to bring it to piano, for example.
Oh, wow. I love that. I
So
love
I think this is something that probably what I wrote, what I transcribed in that jazz language, let's say jazzy language, I don't think that this could be reached through improvisation. Of course, I would love to improvise, but I cannot, so I try to do something else instead.
So again, you're an architect. I like that, the structure. And
Mm.
this is something that really punctuates all your work. You were an arranger, a transcriber, and I'm noticing that so many pianists are going this direction now, especially in their recordings.
Mhm.
They choose the music that they love with their own arrangements. Is this a thing right now, Florian? I mean, or is this just something that comes natural to you? And like the jazz, there's a richness you want to start to put into your arrangements. You feel is not there.
I don't know if it's a thing, no. Let's say how it started for me was very simple. I just heard some piece that I loved and I wanted to try them on the piano.
Okay.
And so I had some ideas on how to write it. It was my first transcription was Romeo and Juliet by Tchaikovsky. And eventually, after 2 years of writing it, I played it once in concert. And not knowing really how it would be received. And it ended up to be very successful and very, yeah, let's say I got a lot of interest about it. And then some organizers asked me to play it again. And in a way, it became also, how to put it? I wouldn't say that it's a selling point, but it's something that became a part of the profile somehow.
Okay.
And it's true that I saw it works in a way. There was some demand, there was some interest for it.
Hmm.
It helped me also to maybe have a profile which was a bit different. But that just came from the reaction of the audience and the people. I just did it firstly because I wanted to play the piece, simply as simple as that.
That is
Um,
fascinating.
so it can be that, yeah, it can be that the, how to say, this discipline has other adepts and that maybe, yeah, that other find their way with it. But I never did that, for example, in order to differentiate myself. I just wanted to do it, and
Hmm.
people liked it, and
Hmm.
that's how it developed somehow.
Again, it just developed.
Yeah,
That Alice of One in Wonderland world of yours. I love it.
I try. I mean, maybe I make it look a bit more simple than it is, but if I can not intervene too much with the way things happen,
Yeah.
I'm happy. Let's say.
But again, like you said in your bio, you imagine the world turned upside down. And in a way, you're kind of shaking up music and making it your own. It's
Yes.
what you hear. It's the texture that you hear, and the sonority and the riches and what you want to bring to it, which is really interesting.
There is this very nice little text by Borges, Jorge Luis Borges, this
Yes,
Argentinian writer whom I
yes.
absolutely love. And it's a little paragraph where he describes a man who decides to draw the world, and he starts to depict hills and mountains and forests and rivers and whatever. And at the end, he realized that all those lines which he painted makes a portrait of his own face. And so I think
Oh my gosh.
automatically we do that. Of course, probably through all these projects and through all those things that you like, you make it a little bit your own, and you reveal yourself through it also. Um, I think it happens inevitably somehow.
Florian, you just revealed yourself, and that is the one part, the nucleus of this interview, really, what you just said. That is really
Very
beautiful. I love that. Wow. So you have a couple of concerts coming up in the United States, which is your entry point, and they're exciting. I know you've been concertizing all your life, literally, but I think April 22nd, you're in Vashon, the arts festival there on Vashon Island in Washington State. I mean, that's really going to be remote in a way. I mean, how fun.
absolutely. I have never been there, so I'm really looking forward to discover it.
And what are you playing on that program?
So I will be playing. One half will consist of two transcriptions of mine, which are the third Brandenburg concerto from Bach
Uh-huh.
and Sherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov. Of course, in a slightly condensed version.
Okay.
And the other half consists of Transcendental Etudes from Franz Liszt and from Sergei Lyapunov. Of course, he's much less famous. He was a Russian romantic composer, a little bit later than Liszt. And he actually decided to complete, in a way, the set as Liszt originally intended to write 24 Transcendental Etudes to cover all the tonalities. And he wrote only 12. Let's say Lyapunov took the 12 missing tonalities and completed the cycle. So I think it was a nice way to put the connection somehow.
Absolutely. I love that feeling of a cycle. I love it. And then I believe on the 25th, you're in New York City, which is very exciting. You're the finale of the Meridian series at Merkin Hall, I believe. So, coming into New York, that is a big moment for a concert pianist, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm really very much looking forward to this little tour in the States, and I think it will be wonderful. I'm really, really happy.
So did you temper your program for the New York City audience?
Well, I mean, I will play the same pieces, but of course I choose a program which I think is both at the same time very accessible for the audience. I think it's quite attractive. It's also a bit unusual, and it's also allowing myself to show on one hand some mainstream big repertoire, and also to include some rarities like Lyapunov, like some of my transcriptions. So I think it's a quite equilibrated program somehow.
I'm excited for you. I think that's thrilling.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck for that.
Thank you so much.
So I want to ask you, you and your wife actually have, let me get this right, you have a small hall.
Absolutely.
Which you manage. And I was reading about this, and I love the idea behind this. There's this gorgeous, in fact, mentorship from you and your wife in this hall. I think it's called Singewimmel.
Yeah. Which is a created word. It doesn't really mean something.
What did you two have in mind, really, for this hall?
Of course, like everything, it came a bit by chance and spontaneously that we got offered that opportunity to manage a little space with a grand piano, Stellway being there, and we always had some ideas about what could we try, what could we try also with the format of classical concerts, and so that was a chance to experiment. We did a lot of experience, some crazy ones, some rather standard ones, some that we regret, some that we are very proud of. I mean, regret, it was just worth trying. We were a little bit trying simply to play with the format also, to see what happens, for example, if we mix two absolutely different styles of music in one concert, or what happens if we let the public vote for the program and decide at the moment of the concert what they want to hear. Of course, we did some. Yeah, that was quite surprising also, because we, at some point, one pianist had two pieces. One was from Hindemith and one was from Bach. And of course, we were 99% sure that the audience would select the Bach. And of course, he played the Hindemith at the end. So it's
I love this. Your performers are you invite your performers, or is it open to the public? Whoever wants to create.
Let's say we a little bit half. I mean, we did some things in partnership with local artists from there, or visual artists, for example, who exhibited some of their paintings. But in general, we still more or less make the programmation ourselves, and we try to have also a balance between known and unknown, between extravagant and more more regular, let's say. I mean, sometimes regular is better than extravagant. We just try out different things, and we see what works, what we want to repeat, what we I think we need to change, and yeah,
How
it's a nice.
fanciful. I love this. How very interesting.
I,
I would expect that from you, actually, turning the
yeah.
world upside down.
I have really to say also that I'm taking part of it, but 90% of the work is actually my wife. So
Okay.
I have to give her credit for that.
I love that. Now, listen, I've got a really important question to ask you, and that is if you could, going back to being an architect, if you could be the architect of a musical life, an ideal musical existence on this earth, where you could craft it for all of us as performers, do you have any ideas about what shape that would take?
Um, that's actually a good question. I, I think probably we all a little bit face. Well, I think there are some difficulties at the moment. Some difficulties with. I mean, or something that I perceive as a difficulty, for example, because maybe I don't like it. For example, the ever increasing influence of social media, which I find,
Yes.
for example, this is something that is okay, it's part of the game, but if it were up to me, I would rather do without, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, I feel that, I mean, that's maybe normal as independent, but we have to be many things at the same time. And some of those things, I think they a little bit detract from the music, or it's very hard not to let them detract from the music. So that's for me something which I find a little bit difficult now is at sometimes the need to be connected, to be quick in answering, to be in contact, etc. And what it does to us, that it maybe reduce the capacity to receive also a longer message, a more complicated message, like I don't know, a more difficult piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
So this is maybe something that I see as in an ideal world, let's say, things would be maybe a bit more equilibrated, and we wouldn't have to push ourselves to try to remain on the, I don't know, or to try to create a hype about maybe not so much. And I think also that's probably the same in every career, but the successful one have too much, the unsuccessful one have too few, and in a way, I feel it's bad for both.
It's interesting. I think social media is a distraction in itself.
Absolutely.
Studies have shown that people who are engaged in social media, I mean, we do become obsessed. There's no question about it. Have a kind of shelf life of 15 seconds. So no one wants to hear an entire movement of Beethoven. They want to hear an exciting part of Beethoven. And that is not the experience of music. So what you're saying, I think, is quite relevant. And I feel that performers during COVID felt this panic attack of not being relevant any longer. So they felt pushed to put themselves out on social media, which I think has taken away from music. I agree with you. I think it is it's a almost sinister distraction in a way.
I mean, it changes. Yeah, it changes also our relationship, our own relationship
Yeah.
as a musician, even to music. And maybe another thing that I would sort of wish, because it's not easy, is to, of course, we try to keep our programs attractive for an audience, which means also to include some big names or some attractive names like Chopin and Mozart. And of course, they are absolutely amazing composers. But I'm sometimes thinking that there are composers for whom it will be today difficult to make space somehow, difficult to make space in a concert world,
Right.
or it will be maybe in smaller or more intimate settings, which is maybe fine. But I don't know. Now, for example, let's say that some of those lesser known, like Metner or Lyapunov, got a little bit lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Metner, because firstly, he's amazing and he got played by a lot of incredible pianists. I mean, Lyapunov, he still has this cycle of 12 transcendental etudes, which relates to Liszt, which makes that it's somehow also a bit catchy in a way. But you have so many others. There are so many others. I mean, even if I think at the time of Schumann, there were so many like small composers. I mean, small.
Yes.
I don't know, but you know, who have completely unknown names, who wrote a lot of treasures. And the problem is that this music is difficult to it's difficult to make space of it for it somehow, or to. And this, let's say, if I would draw an ideal landscape, yeah, I mean, sometimes that landscape would be actually what I see when I see the program of 100 years ago. I mean, if you see Rachmaninoff, he was playing
Mm-hmm.
Henselt, for example. I mean, who
Yes.
plays Henselt nowadays?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
even on piano, like Weber, for example. I mean, the piano sonatas, they were played by Gilels, they were played by Cortot, by a lot of big names. And I mean, Weber is not supposed to be such a rarity, but in a way, it went a little bit off from the mainstream.
Yes.
I think even Mendelssohn now on piano is a little bit off from mainstream, and I feel that what real mainstream is became a little bit more narrow than it was somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I personally would dream that we could not play, yeah, not have a repertoire of 20 composers, but of 200 or 500 composers.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm with you on that one. I'm
Thank you.
very, very, very good. Tell me something, Florian. Is do you have a phrase, or maybe you've just given it to us with the Borges? Do you have a phrase or one word that you think would describe you to the core of your being? That if asked for one word, is there something that comes to your mind that really describes who you are from the depth of your soul?
One word is for sure not possible. I don't know. There are a few lines from books which, of course, you read it and you can never forget it. And I don't know, maybe there are several and more than one. But for example, no one that I think I have in mind is in how do we say l'étranger, so the stranger or the foreigner. I don't know how we say by Camus, the
Okay.
stranger. You know Albert Camus, that French writer, and where the main protagonist, the narrator, he finds himself in jail after he committed a murder, and he remembers his life before, and he remembers his former flat, and he remembers actually walking from one end of the flat to the other end. And so he's in the jail, and every time he remembers that way, he remembers a bit more details. How was the furniture? How was the light coming? What was the texture of the table or whatever? And finally, in his mind, when he's crossing mentally his flat, he sees more and more. And then there is that line in the book, which, for example, I find absolutely incredible. Um, I won't have it exactly, and it's in French, but where he tells that there I realized that a man could live a single day and spend the rest of his life remembering it. I don't know. That's for me is a sentence which is amazing. I don't know if it describes me, but it stayed.
Okay.
It
That
stayed and
is,
it's unforgettable.
but it comes to you as unforgettable. So that is
Exactly.
profound. That is wonderfully profound. Wow. Well, I think you quoting that, I'm going to call you not an architect anymore, but an alchemist.
That's very kind.
I think, which is okay.
I hope so.
It is. There's a certain gold that you're spinning with your words and your thoughts and your dreams and your hopes, and this is what you pass on to others. This is how you mentor to others. And I know you were also teaching, and it must be very exciting for your students. And I know personally, I'm going to look forward to your New York recital.
Thank you so much.
And I wish you all the luck in Washington State, where I hope they receive you with open arms and love you to death. And if you could just do me one favor, could you please do your own transcription of Romeo and Juliet by Prokofiev? If you did that for me, I could die
Okay.
happy. I
Okay.
could literally
I
die
keep,
happy.
that's very kind. I keep it in mind. Thank you so much.
I know it's kind of big, but just hit on the great themes, and yeah,
Huh?
yeah. Thank
I
you
will give
very
the
much.
idea. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, I want to encourage all our listeners to, after this really exciting conversation, to seek out FlorianNoack.com for more information on him, his incredible life, his incredible curiosity, and his ability to turn things upside down and look at things from another perspective. And so shall we. And I think we should all be listening and designing a new world around his ideas, especially in the world of music. So we will watch out for you in New York, Florian, and all the best. And thank you so much for letting us come into your world and
it's a pleasure to talk.
More curiosity for us. I just love that.
Thank you so much.
Please take care of yourself. And to everyone, I hope you will visit my website at centerstagewithPamelaKuhn.com for more art shows and more wonderful people like Florian Noack. And until we meet again, I want to ask everyone to stay safe. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.